Imagine, if you would, you're a young man working a hard job as a bricklayer in Regency-era England. After a hard day's work, you visit your parents and spend time with the family before heading out to return home to your loving wife. At which point, down a dark alley, Professor Peter Venkman, Ghostbuster, leaps out and zaps you with his neutrino wand, mistaking you for a ghost. Pretty far-fetched. Well, actually only the Venkman bit is a fib. In the winter of 1803, the London suburb of Hammersmith was being terrorised by a ghost. A spectral figure dressed in white, though occasionally cowskin, skulking and floating around the area. A year earlier, a poor man had taken his own life and his body buried in consecrated ground, which was a big no-no. Burying a suicide in consecrated ground meant their soul could not rest and would wander abroad in the town. And so it did. The figure was seen by many, one time frightening a wagon and its passengers, scaring them. Another time it alarmed a woman so badly that she took a faint, collapsing, a faint from which she would never awaken, literally scared to death. On another occasion, two men were in a graveyard at night, don't ask, when one felt a cold hand grab at him, choking him from behind. I was going through the churchyard between 8 and 9 o'clock, when some person came from behind a tombstone and caught me fast by the throat with both hands. Then, whatever it was, gave me a twist round and I saw nothing. I gave a bit of a push out with my fist and felt something soft, like a greatcoat. Frequently frightening passers-by, this figure was once escaping the sight of his haunting when his shroud slipped, revealing a man. Could it have been a ghost dressed as a ghost? Or a human being playing a prank? Either way, the inhabitants of Hammersmith were not going to let the matter stand. Nightly watches were started up with men patrolling the area. One such night watchman was William Girdler, whose job it was to also announce the time of the o'clock, and the same man who saw the ghost lose its shroud a week earlier. When asked about the sighting, he stated the ghost slipped the sheet or tablecloth off and then got it over his head. It was just as if his head was in a bag. The ghost's presence was such that anyone even wearing white could have been mistaken for the spirit in the wrong light. One such man was Thomas Millward, a 23-year-old bricklayer. So frequently did he wear all white for his work that his mother-in-law, Mrs. Fulbrook, had warned him to be careful not to be mistaken for the ghost after already being misidentified a few days earlier. He had frightened two ladies and a gentleman who were coming along the terrace in a carriage. For that, the man said, he dared to say, "There goes the ghost." That he said he was no more a ghost than he was, and asked him, using a bad word, did he want a punch of the head. Fulbrook had warned Millward that his attire was too similar to that of the ghost, and that he should wear his greatcoat to hide his work clothes for his own safety. A recommendation he dismissed. On January the 3rd, 1803, Millward had been visiting his parents and sister Anne in Hammersmith, just near Black Lion Lane, where the night patrols were operating. Millward took his time to leave his parents' home to return to his wife, but within moments of him leaving the house, his sister reports hearing a commotion and a voice not her brother's calling out, "Damn you, who are you, and what are you? Damn you, I will shoot you." Very quickly thereafter, there was the sound of a gunshot, then silence. After trying to rouse the interest of her parents, Anne Millward rushed outside to find, just a short way away on the corner of Beaver Lane, her brother lying dead, a gunshot wound to the left side of his face, and several men standing around. One man appeared deeply agitated, 29-year-old Francis Smith, the man who had fired the gun. Smith was an excise officer of a very respectable character with no blemishes or bad words against him. He wasn't a trained soldier or guard, but like many of the men in Hammersmith, he had volunteered to help capture the Hammersmith Ghost. Francis Smith said that a white figure had stepped out of the darkness, that he had called at the figure to stop, but the ghostly figure had ignored him, approaching him in the dark. Smith felt he had no choice but to open fire on what he believed to be a dangerous ghost, or worse, a human dressed as a ghost. Girdler, along with the other watchmen, Mr. Locke and Mr. Stowe, took the deceased to the local Black Lion Inn, where a Dr. Flower would later officially declare the man dead, the bullet destroying his spine and left side of his face. Francis Smith had been sent home by Girdler, and the man waited, willing to face the police and ultimately stand trial. The trial of Francis Smith was a difficult one. Despite the fact Smith truly believed he was acting in defence, the judge had to make it clear that manslaughter was not an option. He had willingly fired a gun at a person, and it had resulted in death. Smith's own statement to the judge acknowledged fault but insisted on his innocence. "My lord, I went out with a good intention, and when this unhappy affair took place, I did not know what I did, speaking to the deceased twice, and he not answering. I was so much agitated, I did not know what I did. I solemnly declare my innocence, and that I had no intention to take away the life of the unfortunate deceased, or any other man whatever." Murder or acquittal were the only options, and this was reiterated when the jury initially brought back a verdict of manslaughter. The jury, therefore, had no choice but to find the 29-year-old guilty of murder, at which point the judge passed the only sentence he could: death by hanging, followed by dissection at the medical school. When the dreadful word guilty was pronounced, he sank into a state of stupefaction exceeding despair. The judge pointed out that even if the man shot had been the actual Hammersmith Ghost, the use of deadly force was still over the top, considering the Ghost's actions were a misdemeanor offence at most. It seemed, however, that everyone involved in the case, even the victim's family, took pity on Smith. The pallid hue of his countenance during the whole trial, together with the signs of contrition which he exhibited, commanded the sympathy of every spectator. Such was the sympathy that the judge agreed he would refer the case to the king himself to commute the sentence, which was done by 7 p.m. that very night. Smith eventually was sentenced to 1 year hard labour, but was eventually pardoned on July 14, 1804. The case would have long-lasting questions passed down the generations. Could a defence of "I truly believed X" be acceptable? Clearly in Smith's case it could not as a defence against murder. But in 1984, 180 years later, the question of intent and criminal accountability was raised again in a much less supernatural case. In 1984, Gladstone Williams had been convicted of assault. He had witnessed a poor man being abused and dragged across the road. Williams intervened to protect the man, striking his abuser. Sadly, the man he saved was actually the criminal, and the man he attacked attempting to restrain a thief whilst the police arrived. His guilty verdict, however, would be overturned on appeal, with the judge stating, "The reasonableness or unreasonableness of the defendant's belief is material to the question of whether the belief was held by the defendant at all. If the belief was in fact held, its unreasonableness, so far as guilt or innocence is concerned, is neither here nor there. It is irrelevant." Had this judgment been around before Smith's trial, he almost certainly would have been acquitted. But Smith's case would usher in nearly 2 centuries of legal debate before it was finally resolved in the 1980s. But there is one thing we are missing in this whole affair. If Thomas Millward wasn't the Hammersmith Ghost, who or what was? Well, shortly after Smith's arrest, a shoemaker by the name of John Graham confessed he had been masquerading as the ghost in order to frighten his apprentices, who had been telling Graham's children unsettling ghost stories. We have no record of what happened to John Graham, but it seems unlikely anything would have come from it. We hope you enjoyed that episode of Spooky History. Hit the bell icon and subscribe to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching, and please do have nightmares. Goodbye.